Okay, before I begin, a quick shout out to the order of the talks. Perfect segue into my talk. So, okay, I am Nikita Soni, and I will be presenting large human language models, a position paper envisioned together with my fantastic co-authors. Uh, yeah, we take three specific positions in this endeavor. The first being LM training should include the human context. Second being large human language models should recognize that people are more than their groups. And finally, LHLMs should account for the dynamic and temporally dependent nature of human context. Today, I will be discussing the need and the challenges pertaining to these positions. The very first question that arises is, what is human context? Given a phrase, I am going to, can have countless continuations to it. For example, each one of us might have a different ending to it here. It depends on who is speaking, to whom, where, in what situation, and when. Other factors like demographics, personality, occupation, and modes of communication also play a crucial role. For example, right now, in my context, if you know that I'm a PhD student at a presentation podium in a conference, and that I'm extroverted or enthusiastic, and that my origins are from India, the probability of saying I am Nikita will be much higher than saying I am Emily. And similarly, the probability of saying I am going to talk about human context for LLMs is going to be much higher than saying I'm going to a hike. Thus, a speaker's language is highly dependent on their states, traits, personal, social, situational, and environmental attributes. This brings us to our first position that LM training should include the human context. In 1950, Dr. Robinson defined a phenomenon called ecological fallacy. It refers to the statistical error that results from the inferences about individuals deduced from inferences about the group, or when individual observations part of a group are treated as independent. For example, in this elephant and the blind man story, I'm not sure how many of you know this story, but the blind men were asked to touch part of the elephant and describe the elephant. Each of them ended up with a very different description, missing they were looking at the individual observations of the elephant. So how do we have this ecological fallacy in our LLMs? Given a set of text input sequences, our LLMs process them independently, even when they can be traced back to a common source, that is, the authors of the text. For example, one author here is more enthusiastic about hiking in mountains, and the other is more keen on animes. Conversely, our LLMs can assume that the text written by many authors are actually written by just a single universal author or a representation of an average person, missing that we have individual differences. This motivates our first position to include human context into language modeling. One broad way to formulate this would be to predict the next word, given the previous words, and an additional human context, say age. Next, LHLMs should recognize that people are more than their groups. People belong to socio-demographic groups and a mix of groups. And a person's identity from their group is contextual. For example, an Indian, when watching a cricket match between India and Pakistan, would bring forward their patriotic Indian groupism versus when they individually exhibit their religious beliefs, and that will have a different religious identity for every Indian, most of the Indians. This brings us to the question, should we categorize people in discrete bins of groups? Research in psychology suggests that we should instead categorize people into as a mixture of continuous factors, which depicts the varying degrees of association of these people with their groups. Furthermore, our uniqueness goes beyond the characteristics that we bring from our groups or continuous factors. We have our unique characteristics and idiosyncrasies. in cross-cultural psychology, Dr. Geert Hofstede, define cultural differences as the dimension of individualism and collectivism. Bringing these concepts into NLP and NLM would entail a flexible interplay between the individualistic and collectivist aspects of the human context. Finally, our last position advocates for alichilims to account for the dynamic and temporally dependent nature of human context. Understanding words, speakers' words, goes beyond syntax, semantics, and the neighboring words. Language is a fundamental form of human expression, conveying thoughts, emotions, experiences that change over time. For example, a person's language would differ when they're on a hike versus when they're feeling dejected over a breakup. Research in psychology also underscores the fundamental importance of time in our lives and the evolving personality processes. It suggests that language expresses these changing human states in addition to the somewhat stable traits of the human. Further, sociology attests that language reflects a temporal rhythm or cyclical patterns of human behavior. For example, a working professional would look forward to Fridays more than a Monday, and this cyclical human state pattern is reflected in their language. Moving on, the human context in NLP has a wide range of past works, with one direction focused on including social human factors into neural networks, and the other focused on personalization. For example, a rich body of work is focused towards building personalized application-focused and debiasing models, and one builds personalizing language models. I would let you look at the paper for a more detailed discussion on the past works. These works have proven to be remarkably beneficial in a range of downstream applications, like machine translation, sentiment analysis, and mental health domains. Now, what does it take to realize these positions? Even with the solid past work, we have many fundamental challenges to address here. I will encourage you to look at the paper for a much more detailed discussion on all the outlined challenges and possible directions. Here, I will be focusing on 4 specific challenges and potential directions. First, how to include the human context. This entails this requires adjusting to the complex neural architectures, which leads us to make many modeling decisions. For example, which layers to modify, or introducing new task objectives or loss functions. Next, we need creative ways to process these multidimensional data sets. Now, when I say multidimensional, I mean the additional user information and the time information adds an additional dimension to the existing dimension of the text input sequences. Lastly, and very importantly, we need to model data that spans multiple domains like education and that are more representationally diverse and reduce biases. Research in behavioral sciences urge us to look beyond the weird group, that is, the Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic group. Not to say that the people belonging to this group are weird, but the notion that it can be generalized to a wider population is weird. Moving on, we can build on some of the past works for possible solutions to these challenges. For example, in the pre-LLM neural networks, the human context H was either added or adapted to the neural network features F. We can think of these features F as the hidden states of our transformer layers today. Like in our past work and some of the other past works, the hidden states of the transformer models are adapted with a user representation to modify self-attention components, or more simply, a user identifier is prefixed in the text input sequences to induce human context. Next, to process all the text from a user together, existing long context problem solutions have been employed, which induces a human processing of the text sequences at the user level. Or devising new temporal objectives, like predicting the next word, given the previous words, and a timestamp. Lastly, we must continue to build on balancing attributes like age and gender and benchmarking cultural differences, which helps us make informed decisions as to when a model can be used in a particular setting. Overall, we wish to ignite tremendous efforts to take upon these challenges and to build upon potential directions to create innovative solutions. To sum up, building on two parallel successes of NLP, large language models and human-centered NLP, we envision large human language models to become the base of our future NLP systems. The rich human context modeled in LHLMs encompasses personal, social, situational, and environmental attributes, capturing the somewhat stable state traits and the changing human states. We look forward and encourage the NLP community to realize this vision together, paving our way towards a more natural understanding of human language. Finally, while we advocate for LHLMs and we advocate for LHLMs, and many of the points here are of ethical consideration in themselves, I would like to take a minute to further emphasize its importance. We should seek a responsible strategy to release and use user-level information. User consent and privacy protections are important. Otherwise, such models can present opportunities for unintended harms and targeted content towards users without their awareness. While laws in some nations like GDPR outlaw such use cases, these are not universal around the world yet. Thank you very much. And I'm happy to take questions.
Hi, thanks for the talk. I thought it was a really good overview. I have the same question for you that I kind of had with the previous talk, which was, I'm a little curious about the bigger picture motivation here. Like, would you say for your own interest that your motivation for the LHLM is more product-based? Like, if we can do this better, then we'll build a better like psychology app or something? Or would you say you have more of a scientific goal, like if we can model these language patterns better, then that will give us insights into social linguistics or like human psychology? Like, what would you say your goal is?
I think it's both and beyond that, because at the end of the day, language is by the people, and you are making LLMs for the people, and you are making, like, you're doing it by yourself, like people are making it. So where is the people's context in the LLMs? Like, you should include it to, I think, understand humans better also, and language expresses humans very significantly, as you've seen in a lot of psychological research. So if you're including that human context, you're ultimately understanding humans better and ultimately also making products which are beneficial towards the humans. So, yeah.
I do kind of wonder if that is like a valid scientific claim, that if we alter the LLM so it becomes more human-like, are we really discovering something deeper about humans? Or are we just taking an intervention that helps us correlate the language output to human language output, but doesn't really tell us much scientific?
So I would take a step back, and I want you to imagine, say, like, a few years down the line, when we have robots or embodiments doing work for us. If it is not able to understand what you want or who you are, what your choices are, do you think these robots will be able to translate your language into what you really want if they don't have your individual context?
I agree. That sounds like a product goal to me, though, not a scientific goal.
Yeah. Okay, so can you elaborate? What do you mean by scientific goal?
Well, I was asking earlier, like, if we can get more human language patterns through including the human context that you had in the conventional, does that tell us something fundamental about humans and human language? Or are we simply kind of mimicking a little bit better?
Well, it would. Ultimately, the aim is that but suppose, for example, biases, right? They induce from humans. If you're able to model the humans into the model, you would be able to better model their biases. That means you're able to better detect the biases and finally better devise mitigation techniques. So in some way, it is basically telling you a lot more about the humans and how the society in general is portrayed in our language and in LLMs.
That makes sense. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Georgina Curta. I'm from the University of Notre Dame. I work in collaboration with the United Nations, and I'm working on both NLP and LLMs and agent-based modeling to better understand human behavior and beliefs in relation to poverty. Poverty.
Okay.
To mitigate poverty, actually, to see what we think about poverty in different areas of the world and how this impacts poverty policymaking and the levels of poverty, and also gender inequality and other topics. So my question is, this was the intro.
But that's very interesting. I really like the idea. Yeah.
Thank you. So my question is, would you be interested in collaborating with the work that we're doing in agent-based modeling on values? So we are kind of modeling different values that are correlated to poverty. So that I think that we can, we would be very interested in working with the inputs that you can provide to us from large language models to see, and the inputs that we can provide from agent-based model, building a bridge between the two disciplines. With the goal to mitigate poverty and to identify the stereotypes on this topic.
I love the idea, and I am publicly announcing I would definitely be interested in collaborating.
Okay.
I come from India, and I think most of us, and probably all of us, know the skew in poverty and richness is so huge in India.
Right.
And if you can do something about it, I'm honored to do it, basically.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. And I will talk to also some of the other presenters afterwards, because I think that some of the work that you presented could also be very helpful. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, really cool talk.
Thank
I
you.
have a quick question. So for claim 1, which was LM training should include human context, do you mean by should, like should always include human context? Like we should deprecate like, you know, this like next word prediction objective for LMs, or is it like for like certain classes of problems that this is a desirable property?
So we're not saying that you should not predict the next word. All we're saying is give it additional context
Okay.
as to who is speaking.
Right, but I mean,
Yeah.
like in all cases, do you think that would be desirable? Like even for like.
So the
base
idea
models?
is like, because language models have become like the base of like, you know, the systems that you're building for applications.
Okay.
And most of the applications, actually, I would say all of the applications are for the humans. We're not building it for the machines. We're building it for the humans. So if you have the human context in your systems, it has a better context and better understanding of the human and their language. So why not?
Okay, sounds good. You covered a lot in the talk, and I'm sure there's a lot more in your paper, so I'll take a read.
Thank you so much.